CNN has released new photographs showing before and after satellite images. These show the extent of the total obliteration of several Gaza neighborhoods in just weeks' time. Meanwhile, Israeli troops conducted a raid into Gaza overnight to, quote, prepare the battlefield for this expected ground invasion. That's according to the Israeli military. Now, the raid comes after the United Nations warned that it nears running out of fuel in the Gaza Strip.
And this comes after 9 Democrats and 1 Republican voted against new Speaker Mike Johnson's resolution affirming U.S. support of Israel's war against Hamas. Those representatives are Jamal Bowman, Andre Carson, Cori Bush, Al Green, Summer Lee, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Delia Ramirez, Rashida Tlaib, and Thomas Massie. Massie explained his no vote in a Twitter post, saying he does not support sanctions against a sovereign country, nor does he support, quote, open-ended promise of military support that is so broad that it could be interpreted to commit U.S. soldiers to the conflict. Yes, I really appreciated Thomas Massie, Republican, his statement on this, which is more in line with the non-interventionist wing of the Republican Party that includes Senator Rand Paul, who's also calling for excuse me, the withdrawal of troops, U.S. troops that are in Niger, that he says there's no congressional authority for them to be there, to be in a conflict with the government of Niger. And if they're attacked, that could, again, that risks getting us involved in warfare. We don't want our soldiers in places for no reason to come under attack. So I was glad to see this from Massie. Massie says he agrees with parts of the statement, that he wants to affirm that the Israeli people have been victimized and are going to defend themselves, but he does not support giving them an endless pile of money and weapons to do whatever they want with in a way that's going to draw the U.S. into the conflict. Yeah, Rashida Tlaib also made a similar statement saying that I have and continue to denounce the killing of civilians, no matter their faith or ethnicity. Targeting civilians is a war crime, no matter who does it. Do not confuse my vote against this one-sided resolution with a lack of empathy for all those who are grieving. I voted against this resolution because it is a deeply incomplete and biased account of what is happening in Israel and Palestine and what has been happening for decades. This resolution rightly mourns the thousands of Israeli citizens killed and wounded in the horrific attacks, but explicitly does not mourn the thousands of Palestinian civilians, including over 2,000 children alone, killed and wounded in the collective punishment of Palestine. She goes on, obviously. Interestingly, the establishment Democrats did not take kindly to these 9 people who did not go along with this resolution. Debbie Wasserman Schultz said that lawmakers who plan to vote against this resolution, quote, someone who votes against this, I would think, doesn't have a soul. That's the language that is coming out against anybody who wants to stand against war crimes. I don't know how else to put it.
I mean, the American people have given Israel more money than any other country on earth. The American people have given Ukraine a lot of money. They give all sorts of nations lots of money. They're giving Ukraine money despite way more than the European people are helping with that war effort, even though it's really more of a security issue for Europe than it is for the U.S. The American people are not soulless. They're extremely generous. And, nothing actually makes me angrier than when political figures get annoyed that the American people don't want to send even more money overseas. Like, if this is so important to you, Debbie Wasserman Schultz or whoever it is, you can write a check then. Like, you can spend your personal fortune handing out donations to other countries' governments for their security needs. For their, Israel is not a poor country. It can provide for its own defense. Why do we have to do it? Debbie Wasserman Schultz thinks you're soulless for asking some questions about whether this is in the best interest of the country we're actually a part of.
And when you look
disgusting.
At those images, I think it does really continue to raise this question of what self-defense really looks like. The images of total neighborhoods being obliterated, over 42% of all apartments, all residential housing in the entire area being gone. I mean, I'm reminded of a quote from an IDF spokesperson, Admiral Daniel Hagari, shortly after the October 7th attacks. He said the emphasis is on damage and not accuracy. And I do think that when you look at those pictures, it reflects exactly that. A reminder, we were talking about a few days ago, maybe last week, people in the hospitals, medical practitioners being forced to drink
the IV fluid in bags because that was the only potable water that was left. And they're treating patients in these conditions. There was reporting at ABC that one surgeon had to amputate half of a foot of a 9-year-old boy because it had become infected. The lack of medical equipment and clean water has led to amputations, and that this was done with only slight sedation on the hallway floor as his mother and sister watched. I mean, that's really what people are experiencing at this time, and the question remains, why are we, as U.S. citizens, continuing to not only fund but endorse on a global stage? How did Vivek Ramaswamy put it yesterday? Offer a diplomatic Iron Dome that covers and protects everything that the Israeli government is doing at this time.
Yeah, it's
a lot. Well,
very hard to see a lot of these images.
Yeah. Earlier this week, the former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Dan Gillerman, made shocking comments about the Palestinian people while on Sky News. Let's watch some of that.
I'm very puzzled by the constant concern which the world and also Britain, I must say, Mark, is showing for the Palestinian people and is actually showing for these horrible, inhuman animals who have done the worst atrocities that this century has seen and the worst atrocities that Jews have suffered since the Holocaust. I mean, you know, when the United States reacted to 9/11, I don't remember people shedding tears for the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. Your country, Mark, actually, Britain, actually joined them and even sent your royals to fight in Afghanistan.
So we have the inhuman animals language recurring again, along with this, surprise or frustration that you hear coming out of a number of Israeli officials now that anyone should be concerned at all about the death of civilians.
Yeah, again, I have no problem describing the terrorist group as inhuman animals, but we should not expand that to the Palestinian people who are themselves victims of what this group has done to Gaza. I also think we should not look back on 9/11 and the immediate what happened in its wake as like a good example of sound policy coming to fruition. We regret. I don't know how you feel about it in England, but in the U.S., there is profound regret among Democrats and Republicans. Republicans are some of the loudest and most frustrated with the empowerment of a federal government to violate our civil liberties that all sprang from that. It would have been so beneficial to stop and think before we passed the Patriot Act, to stop and think before we had endless NSA surveillance, to stop and think before we spent billions of dollars invading and destroying another sovereign country with all the damage it did to that country. For what?
For what?
To make the Middle East better off? Like, a lot of people I think rightly say we don't feel safer because of the situation the Middle East is in now versus when Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi were still in charge of their countries. The Taliban got to get Afghanistan back eventually anyway. What was it for?
What was it
we
for?
We left. The same government's in charge there now. So stopping and thinking would have been beneficial, and anyone trying to cut off a conversation by racing to that, to some preordained conclusion that we need to be more militant or more unthinking or more bloodthirsty has just totally been hiding under a rock for the last 20 years.
I do think bloodthirsty is the right word to use. I mean, again, you have statement after statement after statement made not by casual people on the street who don't have any power, but by generals and other officials in the Israeli army. You had Ghassan Alian say, human animals will be, we are more of this human-animal language. We're dealing with human animals. Human animals will be treated accordingly. You wanted hell, and you'll get hell. You had the statement that we just heard. You heard Benjamin Netanyahu saying we will turn Gaza into an island of ruins. I think the imagery that we saw at the top of the segment, it reflects that's exactly what's been going on. The statement, we're focusing on destruction, not accuracy, from Daniel Hagari, the Army spokesperson. I mean, how many times does someone have to tell you exactly what they're all about before we realize that we're kind of endorsing, not kind of, we are explicitly endorsing with Biden's visit to Israel this exact behavior. And it's also worth noting, we covered this a little bit in another segment, but there's now new reporting that a spokesperson admitted an Israeli official admitted in an interview that the Al Jazeera journalist was in fact targeted shortly after this news. Now, there has been yeah, go ahead.
I'm looking at this now, and this comes from this Suleiman Ahmed account, just doing the translating. I have no idea if it's accurate. I do remember that this was the account that shared pictures of, claiming it was pictures of dead Palestinian children that Ilhan Omar retweeted, that was actually images of kids who'd been gassed by Assad.
Yeah.
So
there are a number of Arabic speakers who say that the subtitles on the Arabic is accurate, and I'm waiting to see if any Hebrew speakers, it's originally in Hebrew, can weigh in as well. But it's a very difficult time. I think your caution is warranted, but it's a very difficult time to be, I think, an American on the outside, feeling absolutely no control over what the foreign policy direction of the country is, with 66% of Americans, again, supporting a ceasefire. So we'll continue to cover this, obviously.
More Rising right after this.